Alright, welcome back to the Modernist Guide, and this is another music review. Halloween season is upon us, and what better way to cap it off, I guess. Not as expected as it turned out to be, but Mastodon, Hushed and Grim is their newest record. It came out on the 29th, and it's different in a good way, but still Mastodon. Mastodon is a progressive kind of sludge metal band from Atlanta, Georgia, founded in 2000. Drummer Brand Daler, guitarist Troy Sanders and Brent Hines, and rhythm guitarist Bill Killier. This is their eighth studio record in 21 years, and every record is basically kind of an evolution of their sound and almost always based on somebody dying. This record is about their agent who died of cancer in 2018. He's their manager or their agent is just, the guy who helps take care of the band. Before that, I believe Emperor Sands, their 2017 record, I think, maybe 2018, was about Bill Killier's wife, who also, I think, died of cancer. 2009 record, Crack the Sky, which was a big deal, was about Brand Daler's sister who died at a young age. Their 2011 record, The Hunter, was about Brent Hines' brother who died in a hunting accident. It's always something. And that usually means you'd think has a concept album come along to do some real dive into some really deep dark themes, and this one definitely does. And I think they've finally figured out a sound they've been looking for the past 10 years. Everyone will say their first like four records are near perfect. 2002 record Remission was raw and blistering and dense, unlike what most people were doing at the time. They evolved a little bit more. My favorite record in 2006, after their commercial success Leviathan 04, 06 saw them broadening out on that style a bit more with Blood Mountain, their magnum opus for a lot of people that introduced a shit ton of prog elements that non-metal people might recognize from Pink Floyd or King Crimson or Yes or different bands from the 70s that had really long, drawn out, complicated songs. Crack the Sky in 09 is what culminated in all that. Then they started shortening their songs in 2011 with The Hunter. They're catchier, but they're still dark and kind of shimmery, and it just felt like both drowning in tar and floating in space at the same time as far as their like production and sound went. Then Once More Around the Sun felt like that a little bit more, but it was more stonery and rockin' and just like a bunch of really good groovy songs. Then people thought they kind of got back in their prog roots with Emperor Sands a couple years later, and that was their last record before this one. But now, while they still have the same kind of guitar style and vocal dynamics, Hushed and Grim has a production that's confusing a lot of people. It's a little hazy, foggy. I wouldn't say muddy or unlistenable. The first single was kind of like that for me, but having heard the whole record now, I don't agree anymore. I think it fits. I think hazy is the perfect word for it. And ultimately, I think since, at least production and sound wise, since The Hunter, this is their most complete record, their most comprehensive idea thematically, musically. It's very gothy, whispery, ghostly, anything like that. It fits perfectly for a Halloween aesthetic. And they think they've had a song called Halloween before. So they have always been interested in dabbling in those gothic themes, but now in the production and style, it really, really shows. Most specifically, I think the theremin or the thermophone is in it, which is that noise you hear that makes like the ooh kind of noise for like alien sci-fi tropes and different things like that. And so that's all over this record, multiple songs. It's in one of my favorite songs, which is Skeleton of Splendor. It's in a couple other tracks like Pushing the Tides, Dagger, Savage Lands, Gobblers of Dregs. It really comes together a lot. This is a huge record. It's a double album. It's 15 songs, but it's an hour and a half long. So this is just a mood record, I think. I have found myself multiple times just enjoying the song in its length, just getting lost in the song specifically, whatever song it is. I do have my favorites, but ultimately, I think as a full record, it's kind of just there. It's very big. I understand people who think might be sluggish or overwhelming or bogged down or bloated or something like that. There's a lot to it. And I think you can kind of throw a dart at a song and enjoy the atmosphere and the style. It is their most complete in a long time. I really like all of their records, period, but I think they finally have the most comprehensive and fulfilled ideas on this record since Hunter. Because I think the more and more I've gone back on Hunter, that record still had the same mindset as their previous four flawless records that people would call. A lot of people just didn't like how short it was or how sing-songy some of it was. It started to introduce Brian Daylor, the drummer, as a more permanent vocalist. They've always struggled with vocalists. Troy Sanders does a decent, like, raspy growl, and he does the hollow, ghostly type vocals on this record. Guitarist Brent Hines, he is on here sometimes, but as he's stated publicly, he's kind of tired of metal and he's kind of a country boy. The two songs that he is prolific on this record, one of them that I kind of enjoy just because of how different it is. The Beast is pretty much a Western sludge song, and that's cool and interesting. It doesn't completely hit home, but it's something to like look into if you're curious of what metal with a Western feel sounds like. That's still like dark and eerie. It's a very like Willie Nelson meets early Black Sabbath kind of vibes, I think. That's putting a lot of weight on it. It's not as good as that sounds, but that's just what comes to mind. The vocals are always kind of a struggle for some people, especially more and more lately, but I think this is actually the smoothest and most acceptable of Braun Daler's vocals specifically. He's always had this kind of like high, catchy pop rock vocal style that a lot of people have kind of hated over the years. A lot of traditional fans thinks he kind of ruins songs. I think he's finally figured out how to sing the way it fits the rest of the group perfectly. I've never had a super big problem, but I kind of noticed that I think the vocals were way more accessible but reasonable. The songs that I would pick for you to like just figure out maybe if the whole record's worth exploring, and my personal favorites are Skeleton of Splendor, Tear Drinker. Pushing the Tides has grown on me from being the kind of off putting first single. I think The Crux, which is the second song on the album, kind of reminds me a lot of Blood Mountain, and since that's my favorite record, I actually really enjoyed a lot. Savage Lands and Gobblers of Dregs, I think, is really good. It's really kind of just throw a dart and see what you land on record. I think it's one of their most consistent, thematically, musically, conceptually, feeling like it's one of their best vibe records. They haven't foregone metal exactly, but there's been a lot of hard metal bands from the early 2000s that now just kind of do more drawn out prog stuff. Opeth was one of the big ones. I've noticed a band I've liked a lot, Somnium. They've kind of done that a little bit. Enslaved has mellowed out a little bit. Just a bunch of different, somewhat extreme, almost prog in the early 2000s are now like almost just full prog with enough metal, I think, where you shouldn't be bothered if it is or isn't great. It's still metal, it's just not turned up all the way and it's not raw, which is what a lot of metal heads like, and that's fine. But this is still a very comprehensive, competent. It's a very competent record. It's just a lot, and I could probably take about four out of the 15 songs and be perfectly fine. These guys clearly have decided that they want a more gothy, moody Led Zeppelin style without like groove focus as much as aggressive minded, intricate stylings of rock metal fusion. It's very elaborate, and all the songs are mostly over 6 minutes for the big part. And I think it works. It's just not as compelling as I wish it was. So for me, it's gonna have to be a 7 out of 10, mostly because I think they have done much better. They haven't done much worse. I wouldn't ever put a single record of theirs less than a 6.5. And it's not a disappointment, it's just they're trying a lot while still trying to be one thing. That takes a lot out of you, and that takes a lot of expectation away. So I try not to like hype stuff up anymore, but I enjoyed this more than their last two. And I think that's the most important part, is to at least enjoy it more than previous records, which means that they're still not, falling all the way down or sliding down or anything like that. So I hope you liked it or loved it. Be curious to know what anyone thinks about it. And until next time, just like, subscribe, and glad you were listening.